OK, news reaching us is confirmation of a line that we brought you an hour ago. Confirmation from Manchester United, a management transition, they call it. Richard Arnold has decided to step down as chief executive of Manchester United after 16 years with the club. Patrick Stewart, they say, will take over as interim CEO, in addition to his existing role as general counsel, with Richard Arnold continuing to provide transitional support until the end of December. So that's only 6 weeks away. A statement from Manchester United continues that a search process will be carried out now for a new permanent CEO. And we've got some quotes as well from the club's executive co-chairman, Joel Glazer, currently in talks over that investment, which we'll get onto shortly. He goes on to say, "I would like to thank Richard for his outstanding service to Manchester United over the past 16 years. We wish him all the best for his future endeavours. We are fortunate to be able to call on the deep knowledge and experience of Patrick Stewart to provide interim stability and continuity as we embark on a search for a new permanent chief executive officer." Richard Arnold, the outgoing CEO, has said it's been an incredible privilege to serve this great football club for 16 years. Through highs and lows, the constant has been the dedication of our employees and fans. I would like to thank all of them for their commitment and their loyalty, and wish everyone associated with the club the very best for the future. And there's also quotes from the man coming in an interim role. Patrick Stewart says, "Together with my leadership team, colleagues, my job will be to ensure the club's foundations remain stable while we embrace changes that can make us stronger over the long term, both on and off the pitch, and to support the search for a new permanent CEO." So that is the breaking news just reaching us. Confirmation from Manchester United that it is all change at the very top of the club. We are still waiting for that investment. I'm joined by our chief reporter, Kaveh Solokol. Thanks for being with us, along with author Chris Blackhurst, who has written a book on the Glazers and Manchester United. It's called The World's Biggest Cash Machine. Kaveh, big developments. Tell us what it really all means.
Well, look, that statement from Manchester United talked about continuity and stability. But of course, there's been very little stability at United for a long time. The club has been in limbo for at least 12 months, while the Glazers have been trying to decide whether to sell the club or whether to just sell a minority stake in the club. And we know that in the next few days, it's going to be announced that Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos have bought a minority stake in the club. And apparently that is going to give them a lot of influence over the football operations at Old Trafford. And I think Richard Arnold is going to be the first of quite a lot of high-profile people who are going to be leaving the club. And to be honest, he's had one of the hardest jobs in football. It is not easy running Manchester United at the moment. It is not easy working for the Glazers. He's had a pretty torrid time for 18 months. He's been at United for a long time. His background is in the commercial department. I think he was much more comfortable in that environment. So I think he'll be the first of quite a few changes that we will see over the next few days. I think whoever had bought the club, it was likely that people like Richard Arnold would probably be leaving.
Yeah, so the interim solution is Patrick Stewart, who's already on the inside. So they're looking to, just keep things ticking over until we learn more?
I think, it's significant that he's been called interim. That means he's probably not going to be around for very long. If Jim Ratcliffe gets the kind of influence that we believe he is going to get, he will be able to maybe influence who is going to take that job on a full-time basis. There's been lots of talk that it could be somebody who already works for Ineos Sport, Jean-Claude Blanc, who used to have senior executive roles at clubs like Juventus and PSG as well. But looking at it from the outside, this still looks like an almighty mess, because we're going to have a situation where somebody who only owns 25% of the club is apparently going to be calling the shots. And there is going to be a new football operations board. Dave Brailsford, somebody who's got a lot of experience in cycling, is apparently now going to be somebody who's also going to be calling the shots at Old Trafford. I think, it's going to be a fantastic story for journalists. It's going to be a fantastic story for Chris to maybe write a sequel to his excellent book. But if you're a Manchester United supporter, this is not the brave new world that you wanted. You're not going to be seeing the back of the Glazers. It is more uncertainty. It is more turmoil. and it's more of the Glazers ultimately owning Manchester United.
Well, Carver, you've given Chris Blackhurst such a wonderful sell. I have to bring you in at that point, Chris.
Fantastic, thank you.
Just on that point that Carver makes, Jim Ratcliffe, we understand, he's taking 25% and he wants to run the whole show, specifically the football side of things. How's that going to work in practice?
Well, look, it's a very good question. I mean, it's very simple. If they're going for a player that's costing £100 million, £75 million of that is Glazer money, 25 million is Ratcliffe money. How does that work? Now, it may be that the Glazers concede that the football side they have let languish and they've not done enough with it. They don't know enough about football. Well, my worry there slightly, and I'm not anti-Jim Ratcliffe, but there's not much in Jim Ratcliffe's record that says that he does either. Nice are not exactly the runaway success in France. He owns Lausanne. Dave Brailsford is a brilliant manager of a cycling team. Well, cycling is not the same as football. So how it is going to play out, I do not know. And for the fans, the biggest problem is that the Glazers still have 3/4 of the club.
Yeah, and when we talk about people that own football clubs, these are enormously valuable commodities. They're billionaires. How is it ever going to work when a billionaire, at either side of the coin, whether it's Ratcliffe or whether it's the Glazer family, ultimately have to be backseat drivers?
Well, it's not, because it's their money, and this is all about money. And if you're putting in a fortune or you're sitting on an asset that is worth a fortune, and it is, you're going to make very sure that it's protected. And what the Glazers have done all along is that they've built up the commercial side. The commercial side of Manchester United is an absolute powerhouse. It's incredible. If only that had been replicated on the pitch, then everyone would have been happy. But it's not been like that. But it's all about money, I'm afraid.
Carvey, we talked about it earlier, myself and Chris, off-air. The change at the top with Richard Arnold, in effect, leaving the club in the next 6 weeks' time. Does that signify that the investment from Jim Ratcliffe is now imminent?
I think we're going to get an announcement pretty soon. We've been talking over the last couple of weeks about the fact that United like to choreograph these announcements so it doesn't affect the first team. We're in the middle of an international break at the moment. We never normally get announcements on the day of a game or a day before a game or a day after the game. I think Erik ten Hag is very territorial when it comes to issues like that. So I think we will get an announcement shortly. I think what's interesting, if we're going to talk about Erik ten Hag as well, is what does this mean for Erik ten Hag? Now, we were reporting a few months ago that our understanding was that as far as Erik ten Hag was concerned, he would prefer it if the Qataris bought Manchester United. He would prefer it if somebody new owned 100% of the club and somebody who had unlimited funds to be able to back him would be in charge of the club. Obviously, that hasn't happened. I think in the short term, there are no immediate plans to replace Erik ten Hag, but he himself knows that the period between now and January, when the window opens, is absolutely crucial for him as far as results are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I'd make a point there as well, which is that I don't think we know what Jim Ratcliffe thinks of Erik ten Hag, and it's that classic thing. Erik ten Hag is not Jim Ratcliffe's choice of manager. He was the Glazers.
Just as Russell Arnold wasn't his choice as
exactly.
chief executive.
He was the Glazers' choice. So I know that if I was Erik ten Hag, God forbid, if I was Erik ten Hag, I'd be feeling a bit awkward right now. I wouldn't be too sure who they want, where they want the club to go, and it is a huge time of uncertainty.
I said Russell Arnold, he's a cricketer, Richard Arnold.
We saw the situation as well with Chelsea as well. Takeover there. Thomas Tuchel was the manager. He'd been very successful. He'd won the Champions League. They became club world champions. Just a few months later, the new American owners decided to replace him with Graham Potter. And virtually everybody who was in a senior position at Chelsea has been replaced. This is what happens when we have takeovers. Of course, this one is a little bit different because the person coming in is only going to be buying 25% of the club.
Yeah, and we've been told that with the investment, whenever it is confirmed, there will be money spent on stadium and infrastructure. Erik ten Hag and a lot of the Manchester United fans will be going, what about the January transfer window? Would you imagine that they'll have money to spend?
I think they'll have some money to spend, not as much as they would have had under Qatari ownership. I think if you look at what Ineos have done in the other clubs that they own, they haven't really thrown money around. You know, at Nice, they were getting free signings in. Players like Ross Barkley, Kasper Schmeichel, Aaron Ramsey. And I think under the new sporting director at Nice, and they've got a new young manager, they're looking for value in the market. I think what Ratcliffe thinks is, look, United's transfer dealings have been disastrous over probably the last decade. They've spent far too much money. They've been signing the wrong kind of players, paying too much for players, paying them too much as well. A lot of the players they've been signing have been either too old or too young and unproven. So I think what they're going to do is come in and say, you know, we've got a new way of doing things. It's all going to be about marginal gains. It's all going to be about data. We're going to unearth these gems in the transfer market. But guess what? That's what every other club is doing as well. So, you know, on paper, it sounds like a great strategy. But in reality, more often than not, it doesn't work.
No. Chris, Manchester United fans have been crying out for a development in this story for the best part of 12 months now. We've had a big development this morning, but ultimately, do you think this leaves them with more questions than answers?
Yes, there's no question about that, because if it was Qatar, it would have been a straight deal. If Qatar wanted 100%, they'd got 100%, it would be their club, and they would do it. You know, there aren't many questions there. Because of the way this is structured, and you know, we don't know actually, but we're assuming that this is the way it's going to be structured, all the signs are, it makes it more complicated. And fundamentally for the fans, it means that the Glazers are still there. And they, as we all know, they can't stand the Glazers. And so you've got this, I was going to say elephant in the room, but you know, it is an elephant in the room. I mean, they are still there, and they're a big block.
Carvey, just one point on the search for a new CEO while the interim Patrick Stewart comes in. Is this likely to be an open process? Would the CEOs of the world of sport be clamouring to get involved and get in touch with Manchester United, or do you think that might already be a sew-up for somebody?
I think it's going to be somebody from Ineos Sports. I mean, you know, Ratcliffe has already got Ineos Sport set up. He's got a sporting director there. He's got a chief executive there. His brother used to be involved in running his football clubs. Dave Brailsford is very, very influential and very senior in that setup. So I think he'll have somebody in mind. But obviously, as Chris has been saying, ultimately the club belongs to the Glazers. So whatever Ratcliffe has in mind, the Glazers are going to have to agree to it as well. So, you know, we've got an extra person in the room now who's going to be involved in the decision-making process.
Yeah, I would add to that as well. I mean, look, the chance to run Manchester United is probably every football sports chief executive's dream, except that it is also a poison chalice. You are putting yourself out there. You become the number one hate figure after the Glazers. I'm not sure if there'll be a huge rush of applications. I mean, I'm not entirely convinced.
I mean, the size of the job, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. And when you look at their rivals, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, how they have, you know, left them standing, basically. This is a job that is going to take, you know, years and years to turn Manchester United round. Just to develop the stadium is going to take years and years and years, let alone the team. And we saw today with the accounts of Manchester City coming out, you know, Manchester City record revenue. Last year they made, I think, something like £80 million more than Manchester United. They won the treble last year as well. Next month they're probably going to become world champions in Saudi Arabia, the FIFA Club World Cup. Meanwhile, Manchester United have to go to Galatasaray to try and get a win. Otherwise, they'll be knocked out of the Champions League. They haven't won the title since Sir Alex Ferguson left. I mean, look at their results. Look at the performances on the pitch. Question marks about Erik ten Hag's future. This is just more questions. And ultimately, the Glazers are still in charge. Whatever anybody says, all the PR that we're going to get over the next few days about Dave Brailsford, marginal gains, Ineos, Ratcliffe, Manchester United belongs to the Glazers.